Welcome in, everyone. UGA Football Live. I'm JC Shelton. Welcome in to Instant Reactions. We've done it every week this season, and we're here again after Georgia's win over Auburn, Deep South's oldest rivalry in Athens, homecoming in Sanford. Sad I couldn't be there covering college football for Athlon Sports today. And obviously, we're all a little distracted here. So I appreciate you guys throwing me on, whether I'm on the very corner of your screens right now or I'm just sitting beside you talking, because I also am watching this Alabama game right now. Vanderbilt is up 40-28 on Alabama. Just scored again off a fumble. I mean, it's just this is incredible. And I haven't been watching very closely like you as well. You know, we had a game, right? This is Deep South's oldest rivalry. You know, got to watch the dogs, right? But this is very close to actually happening. And Alabama always gives you that little look where, you know, they're going to come back, they're going to make plays. They still got Ryan Williams, but there's 4 minutes plus in the game left. They're down 12. Okay, this is just incredible. This is incredible. So I'm also watching it here, but we have business to attend to, right? Georgia Auburn, 31-13. Slowest start again, and I know you guys are probably not happy with that. I don't know what to put the finger on, to be honest, right? This is no easy, oh, well, the offensive line is just bad this year in the first half, or Carson Beck just doesn't, he's seeing ghosts. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's throwing incomplete passes in the first half. The defense, it's not an easy thing. I don't think anybody, and there's a lot of really, really smart ball knowers in this Georgia football space who cover this team. I have yet to see one thing where I'm like, yep, that's, that makes sense. That's it. I don't know, right? Because and Carson Beck said after the game that Georgia had an amazing week of prep. Okay. You didn't notice that in the first half, right? I think the run game was there early. And, if you watched our preview show yesterday, that you heard me talk about at length, really just the effort to get the run game going should be better this week. All right. Because Auburn offensively doesn't have enough worth to put up 21 in the first quarter like Alabama did last week. Right. So that's going to give you opportunities to run the ball, right, to establish and get into shorter third downs. Two of those things were true, right? Georgia did establish the run early. They were in short third down situations more often, and that really led to a really good day on third down. And we'll get to that a little bit, but it's just the first half. I don't know, man. I don't know where it's execution wise. It's hard to put a finger on it, because I think Georgia was taking shots down the field. They were, establishing the run. Didn't have a problem with the play calling necessarily. It's so hard to put a finger on, right? Because Georgia, and talent wise, you have a quarterback like Carson Beck, talent all over the field, really good offensive line. I know they're missing Tate Ratledge. They've been kind of mixing and matching there. They're also missing Jared Wilson today, which I think played a little part in that first half when penalties, offensive line, negative plays around midfield, right? That really killed Georgia's drives, because I thought at one point at halftime it should be 21 points up on the board for Georgia. There really should have been. These are instant reactions. We haven't got a chance to watch it again, and we'll talk about it next week. But I just don't know, that those first half struggles for Georgia, and it's, it bit them against Bama. And if it keeps happening, it's going to really bite you at Texas. Right. And we're a big picture show here. Right. We're going to talk about those matchups. And we're thinking about that. It's always in the back of our minds. But at the end of the day, you faced a good team. I think Auburn's a good team. There are turnovers away from being undefeated. When Hugh Freeze says that, I tend to agree, because, they're like 100th in the nation in turnovers, 100th plus. They're like 130. And that's really killed them, right? They could easily be 5-0, right? So I think you played a good team. You played a really good defensive team. They've been playing really good defense. They haven't allowed more than 27 points until today in those losses too, right? They had all those turnovers in those games to Oklahoma, to Arkansas, Cal, and they still didn't allow more than 27 points. This is a really good defense Georgia just faced. I think up front, the second half, things started to be more in Georgia's favor on both sides of the ball, right? This offensive line really established the run in the second half even more. I mean, 160 yards on the ground for Georgia. I'll tell you what Etienne finished with. He was really, really good today. He finished with 16 for 88. I believe that his best total, although I don't remember what he put up against Kentucky. I think that was a good total too. 2 touchdowns, long of 23, 5.5 average. Nate Frazier, right? He didn't get any snaps in Tuscaloosa last week. He's played sparingly since the Clemson game, and Georgia needed him there, right? With ETN out, they haven't really needed him since in that facet. And Kirby Smart's talked about it. It's just pass pro, right? And a young back like that, a young back who just joined the team in the summer, pass protection is a really difficult thing to learn and to get used to at this level of football. So that's what's kind of holding him back as far as playing wise go. But the burst he has is just something special. You see a little bit with ETN there as well, and I noticed that in the spring game when his first time he strapped up in a Georgia uniform. And we talked about that at that time. You noticed it then. And it's still there. I can't wait to see him grow and develop into more of an all-around back, and that's when he's really going to take off. I think the country's going to take notice. By the way, quick update, 2:51 left. I know you guys are watching it, but I'm kind of updating myself here. 2:51 left. Vanderbilt still up 12. This is incredible. But yeah, I think ETN there is doing such a good job, I think, and he's really making this run game, putting it on his back a little bit, and then you get that second punch by a guy like Nate Frazier. I mean, that's so hard to defend. And Branson Robinson, dude, he's still not getting going. Why is that? To me, I think, and today it stood out to me, and I think I tweeted it, was like, when he comes into the game, and these are this is the top level of college football. These coaches, assistants, they know when certain personnel comes to the game. When Branson's back there, it's hard to miss him. I mean, he's absolutely massive. Alabama just scored. That's just, of course they did. It's going to be a late game. It's just a massive challenge, I think, for Branson Robinson when he comes in, because he is that between the tackle running back, right? He is that powerful presence. He can scoot too, but I feel like Georgia puts him in those situations when it's against a loaded box. It's against a defensive line like Auburn's and the SEC. It's a really good group. And he just, they're ready for him, basically. That's my kind of rant on that. I think it's really impactful if Branson gets going eventually, because Georgia lives and dies by the running game at times. They have. I think that's when they're successful. They do. And without a running quarterback, it's even more pivotal. So something to watch out for. But I think this group overall, as far as on the ground, one of the best performances we've seen this year. So you can be happy with that if I'm a Georgia fan. We'll talk about Carson Beck here. Carson, so, didn't have as many drops today. Maybe two that stand out. Arian Smith. I hate it for Arian Smith. I really do, because that was a drive killer earlier in that game. Georgia was moving the ball well between the 20s. And he had an opportunity there. Georgia did, to extend the drive. And it was a really well-placed ball by Carson Beck. Good route by Arian. He created his own separation. And then just a drop. I know it wasn't an easy catch necessarily. It wasn't right in the numbers. It was over the shoulder, but you got to catch those, man. You got to, right? Because you can create that separation with your speed, and it's such a big, big tool. But then you can't close. If you can't close, I mean, it doesn't matter, right? And it's those kind of plays and those opportunities Arian Smith has to get better at. And hopefully it's kind of been a thing for him during his career, right? Injury setbacks and then the drop setbacks. But something to watch out for him. If he can improve in that area, it'll be big for Georgia, because he does create separation. Absolutely. And Carson Beck, getting back to Carson Beck, good game as far as execution-wise. I think he did miss a couple, but execution-wise, you can't really argue it. It's 23 of 29, his best completion percentage of the year, 79%, 171 rating, 240 yards, 2 touchdowns. Late in the game, he was really on his stuff, right? Because Georgia had an opportunity in the fourth quarter to put that game away, and he was making big throw after big throw. It was 1st and 40 at one time, right, with the penalties. 2 15-yarders made it 1st and 40. Big throws after that to really close this game out for Georgia. Was impressed with that, because Auburn they needed that, right? So their best players on the field, their best calls defensively were too, and Georgia made them pay. And I think the protection started to hold up. That's when I mentioned this offensive and defensive line for Georgia kind of stepped up in the second half, which Carson Beck was clean for majority of that second half. Had a couple sacks there early. And I think it's really impressive for that group because of Tate Ratledge's injury. Michael Morris is coming in. Monroe Freeling is coming in. They're moving Truss around. So that's not exactly a cohesive group right now, but I think they played pretty commendably there in the second half and keeping Carson Beck clean and letting him kind of go to work, right? Be the distributor that he has been so good at being throughout his career. Um, and we'll move on to the defense. Defensively, really impressed with the group up front, right? Michael Williams looks a little bit better, had a sack in the red zone. Tyrone Ingram Dawkins had 2 sacks. He played really well. I know Chad's had some penalties, but I was impressed with him. Desir Stackhouse is going to make a lot of money in the NFL. I'm convinced. Kristen Miller, keep an eye on Kristen Miller. There was a report that he was out the rest of that game. I can't remember exactly when he went down with a knee injury. So keep an eye on that. I don't know how serious it is. Knock on wood if you're a Georgia fan. That group there in the defensive line has been decimated with injury. We all know that. So it's really important for him and this Georgia defensive line moving forward because there's a lot of good quarterbacks Georgia's about to face, right? So you need that group. And I think they, as collectively as a whole, did a really good job of creating pressure and getting Peyton Thorne outside the pocket. Peyton Thorne, hey, props to you, my man. Peyton Thorne played really well last year against Georgia too, and he was more of as a running quarterback. But I think he made some good passes today as well, and he threatened Georgia down the field a bit. And he had a wide open touchdown. I think it was a fine thrown ball. It was a little behind an Auburn receiver. That would have kind of changed that game a little bit. I know Georgia was up at the time, but it would have changed that game a little bit if that Auburn receiver would have caught that wide open touchdown because he had beat Jonel Aguero, and he had it right in his hands and dropped it. But commendable job by Peyton Thorne playing, and he plays up to his opponents. Played well at Oklahoma or against Oklahoma. Played well today in Athens. Props to him. That offense just, they're really, really one-dimensional, right? And that running game did kind of take off in the second half a little bit for Auburn. I was like, man, Georgia's getting gashed here with that big run to Jarquez Hunter. He's one of the better backs in the SEC, and I think he proved that today. But when it mattered most, that's when Georgia's defensive line really stepped up too, even further in that second half and put the game away. Was impressed with that group. Malachi Starks all over the field. Jalen Walker is just absolutely unblockable. You remember that fourth down, I think it was, and it was a read. So, and Hugh Freeze just absolutely lit into Peyton Thorne. So I don't know if that was a mistake on the read because I don't think you can, right? Because Jalen Walker came inside and then quickly jumped outside once he knew that Thorne was going to read him and keep the ball. And you just can't block that kid because Jarquez Hunter tried to block Jalen Walker. I don't care how strong you are. I know the broadcast was talking about Jarquez Hunter benching 600, almost 700 pounds. And I'm like, he has short arms. He's a big dude, but man, that's a lot. But it doesn't matter with Jalen Walker. He's going to make money in the NFL, boys and girls. He is on a really, really fiery run this season in a money year for him. Money year for him. Sorry. So I was impressed with him as well in that defensive group as a whole. Cornerbacks, being a corner is tough, right? You're on an island, everybody's looking at you, and they only really call your name when you do something bad. And Dalen Everett was beat a couple times. I really like Julian Humphrey and Daniel Harris in their play today. A couple of times, one stands out to where Julian Humphrey was on an island having to make a tackle, or there's a lot of green grass in front of Peyton Thorne. I think this was in the first half. Yes, it was. And he comes up, makes a great stop. And tackling has been inconsistent at times. It's crazy to say that for Georgia, but it has been. I think it was better today. I think it was better today as a whole. Couple more things here. Let's talk the aggressiveness a little bit. Not as aggressive as I expected. And if you had tuned in earlier this week and I had talked about it, I was like, well, you learned so much in that second half against Alabama. But of course, you want to take what the defense gives you. I get that, right? You want to force anything. That's when bad plays happen. But I expected aggressiveness. And I don't know if it was just what Auburn did that kind of switched Georgia's game plan, or that was the game plan in the entire week leading up to it, which was establish the run, take shots at times, but don't be overly aggressive. I was expecting, if I had to pick, I was like, aggressiveness, because you learn so much. You want to get prepared too for these close games that are probably going to be coming up here against Texas, Ole Miss, and ultimately Tennessee later in the season. So I thought there would be kind of that strategy going into it, but there wasn't. I'm not sure why. Maybe Kirby Smart will give us some insight. Probably not, but he might. As we speak, he's probably talking to the media. And they were relying on their defense. I think it all leads down. I don't think Georgia's scared to do that, even though I know how that first half turned out against Bama. And that was just an absolute crazy game anyway. But I think they're just, and Georgia has been typically this way anyways. When they play a defense who they don't like the look as far as going down the field, they're fine with, dinking and dunking, taking the underneath, shot here and now and then, but really establish the run and try to ride that into, third and shorts to keep the drive moving. Because you have a defense like Georgia's defense. You can rely on that defense as much as you want most of the time, right? The large majority of the time, 90% of the time. And you can do that. So it's kind of like the New England Patriots almost, when different game plans, and you can do, if you do everything well, you can do and focus in on, if you find something that the defense doesn't do well for Auburn or whoever you're playing the next week, you can kind of change your entire plans to that if you're able to do that. Execution wise, I think was better though for Georgia this week. So I think as a Georgia fan, you should be happy with that. Dan Jackson. Let's talk Dan Jackson. I'm going to talk Dan Jackson. I have it in my notes. Dan Jackson. When was the last time? Think about it. Because I was trying to think about it during the game. When was the last time you saw Dan Jackson in the wrong spot or get beat crazily? Right? Blocks a field goal. This is a former walk-on we're talking about. He still doesn't have a scholarship, by the way. That was a broadcast nugget that I heard. Still doesn't have a scholarship because he has NIL money, doesn't need it. That's what the quote was saying. But walks on, waits his turn, and now he is an established starter, knows the defense better than anybody. He's always in the right spot, man. He's impressive. And he doesn't get, because you have a guy like Malachi Starks standing 10 yards beside you on the other way. So he takes a lot of that, of the headlines, I should say. But I love Dan Jackson, man. He's a gritty guy. Absolutely. He's always in the right spot. He got beat a little bit, right? Auburn receiver had a step on him in the end zone in the fourth quarter, and just perfect defense. Hits him at the right time when the ball hits. There was no pass interference. I know Greg McElroy was on the broadcast. I think he's reeling from Alabama's game right now. He's probably watching it. He says, it could be PI. That was not pass interference. Perfect defense by Dan Jackson. He blocked a field goal today. That was a big play at the time, right? That was a closer game. Really, really good from Dan Jackson, man. I think he is playing so well. And it's impressive because he's keeping guys that, are 4 and 5 stars off the field, right? Because he's playing so well. It just pays to be in the right spot almost every single time. And I know Kirby Smart really appreciates that too. Absolutely. Led the team in tackles today. Pass breakup to Malachi Starks, 6 tackles. He was second. CJ Allen, he leads the team, but he had 5. Let's see. Raylan Wilson played well, tackle for loss. And the edges, Gabe Harris played well. We already talked about Tyrone Ingram-Dawkins. He had a career day, really 2 sacks. Right? So I think this defense played as advertised. They really did. They controlled the game. It really forced Auburn to work for every single thing they got. And I know, Georgia fans, they wanted to see absolute joyless murder ball today in Athens. Did it happen like that? No. All right. But this is an SEC win. All right. This is an SEC win at home, homecoming. Only your second home game of the season for Georgia. And I think this team absolutely has to feel good about what they put out on the field today, right? Because there was so much negativity around that Alabama game, and they come out and showed out. Now they show out. I said 34-9. That was my prediction. We're close. I thought Georgia's offense was going to do a little bit more today, and they ultimately didn't. But you have time to work this out. You got Mississippi State next week, one of the worst teams in the SEC. And then you have the trip to Texas. And that is going to be on everybody's mind next 2 weeks. Can Georgia, right? Can Georgia and that team's makeup, and I think Kirby Smart does such a good job of this, is keeping these guys focused on a weekly basis. Can Georgia play at Mississippi State without thinking about what's coming down the road? And I think just because they played in so many big games over the last 3 seasons, especially 4 seasons, especially, that they've shown that they can do that. So I don't have any doubt. But that is the question, right? You still got to ask it. Can you do that? And I'm sure these guys are going to get asked about that all week, to be honest. So that's the thing, right? Big picture situation. Georgia showed up today. They did what they needed to do to win. I think the execution was fine. Was it elite? No. All right. And they just still have time to grow, right? Still 5 games in the season. You still have time to grow. All right. 6 games in the season. Yeah, still have time to grow. That's ultimately the product you have now. You do not want it to be the same later in the season. If it is, you probably didn't end up where you wanted to be. quick check-in. Guys, I think Vanderbilt just won this game. I see people hugging. Is that 49 seconds left, up by 5? It's happening. Oh my gosh, Vanderbilt at home. Alabama Crimson Tide. The rat poison has affected Tuscaloosa. Nick Saban, what is he thinking right now? Where's Nick Saban? Somebody get the camera on Nick. Is he there? Dude, I hope he's there. I want to see clips of Nick. I want to see, what if we saw the phone call between him and Kalen DeBoer after this? He's going to be in that office in Bryant-Denny Stadium very early tomorrow morning. All right? I think he is. I can't wait to see the historical stats on this game and how big of an upset it is. That is just absolutely crazy. And let's talk about this, because this is an SEC loss for Alabama. I don't know if you remember that Vanderbilt was in the SEC. They are, folks. They are still in the conference. I know it's easy to forget sometimes, but that's an SEC loss for Alabama. So now you're tied with Georgia in the standings. Now you have the tiebreaker, of course, but you still got to play Tennessee if you're Bama on the road. And the last time that Alabama played Tennessee on the road, we know what happened, and that was with Nick Saban on the sidelines. So this is a huge shakeup. Do not underestimate how big of a shakeup this is as far as the SEC race goes, right? Because now you got perfect Texas, who has to play them dogs in a couple of weeks. Alabama fitting to lose, from Jaden Rogers on X. Appreciate the comment. Yes, they are, sir. I believe it's pretty much done the way it looks. I know I'm glancing here, but that is just absolutely crazy. Cannot wait to kind of look at the SEC standings after we get off here and see what we're dealing with here and who has to play who. Because I know that big game for Alabama against Tennessee. Georgia, obviously, we already talked about them. Everybody knows who they got. And Missouri lost today swimmingly. A&M is perfect in the conference. A&M has to play Texas at the end of the year. This is going to be one of the most entertaining SEC races we've witnessed. And I think it's because of the going away with the divisions, and I think it's because of the playoff included into this. It all plays a part. But this is going to be an absolute wild finish to the SEC. But Georgia fans, if I'm thinking from that perspective and you guys' perspective, just joyless murder ball for the rest of the season and kill everybody. I think that would be perfect outcome for Georgia. Will it happen? Probably not. But yes, absolutely. I think if you're a Georgia fan today and you're leaving the stadium, headed downtown, you should feel good about what happened on Dooley Field today for the Bulldogs. We'll be right here next week. I got a guest in the works for you, former Georgia defender, cup of coffee in the NFL. He's going to join us. We're going to talk about this performance and also preview Mississippi State, talk a little Texas too. It's time. We can talk about it. Team Georgia, the team shouldn't be talking about it. We can talk about it. So we're going to do that next week. I appreciate you joining on, even with the massive upset that's going on right now. I'm looking at, are they rushing the field? They absolutely have to, right? You got to rush the field, man. Enjoy the time. Burn some couches, Vanderbilt fans. The Commodores. Way to be. Way to be. From every other college football fan that's not a Tider in the country, we appreciate it. Thank you so much. And thank you guys for watching while this upset, the historical upset, was happening too. Really appreciate you guys jumping in. It's one of my favorite things we do each week, especially after a win. It's been kind of dismal last couple of weeks. You had Kentucky and then Bama and that, right? But this is a good one. This was a good one. We can leave this one with a smile. Y'all take care. Enjoy the rest of the college football slate. Oh, hold on. Shane Brandon on Facebook. Ha, Alabama lost. Ha. We're going to put that one up. Yep. And we all appreciate this. Got to. And we'll end it with that. Alabama lost. Ha. We'll end it with that. We'll see you guys soon. Be back next week. Enjoy the rest of the college football slate. Have a good Saturday night. Appreciate it.